close beta code. And my goals are, of course, making it pro and first contenders and then probably Overwatch League. So I'm taking a year off to try to do that.
Oh, so you're taking the year off and you're just grinding Overwatch.
Yeah.
Cool. And how old are you?
I'm 19 at the moment.
Oh, that's a bold decision. Okay, so we'll go we'll try and go in depth and try and talk about things that you need to know in order to try and accomplish that. First off, if we go to the Aggie window where you can draw, what sort do you think your weaknesses are, like especially in this map and things like that? What do you think you lack?
On at least the first map, I'm not 100% sure how to play into floats, like floats we floats, how to bubble management that, and also my positioning lacks a bit, I think. Also playing into Mei GOATs, our team isn't quite sure, and me not quite sure how to do the tempo shifts and stuff into that.
Okay, so this is a good map because in this Nepal map, so it is going to be Nepal, and it's good because we will see 3 different compositions. We will see you guys playing floats, which is the Winston GOATs. We'll see you playing regular GOATs mirrors, and we'll see you playing Mei GOATs. So we'll be able to talk about all of them. I think you guys were a little bit better than your opponents. You didn't have that much trouble beating them, but we'll still be able to talk about all 3 of these compositions. And as always, if you have any questions, anything you're unsure of, anything that maybe I overlook but you really want to know and understand, just make sure you ask me the questions. So something I have for you before we start. So when you are playing Zarya and GOATs or any of these compositions, what do you think your role is in the communication department? What are your responsibilities?
Calling my bubbles. That's really important. Also, calling if I get someone low, if I'm pressuring Ryan Shield or if I'm high charge.
So you say calling bubbles, but this is pretty broad. So what? I think you can kind of because obviously this is one of the most important things. But how can you categorize this into a bunch of different things? Like what kind of encapsulates calling bubbles?
We have bubbling for energy, peeling with personal bubble, and calling personal bubble uses like using it to engage, using it to disengage, and for energy as well.
So far, what I've written down is using it for energy, calling when you want to use it for energy, calling your uses in general, and calling your the purpose for the bubble, right?
Yeah.
Do you think you do all of this consistently?
Sometimes I forget, but I'm currently working on that. So I've noticed I'm lacking a bit of that. So yeah.
Because it's very important that your team kind of, especially on the GOATs meta, everything is like especially in the neutral fights, so much works around bubbles, so it's very important for your team to know the purposes and your tempo based on the bubbles, right? Your purpose can be let's engage with bubbles, let's bubble first and fall back, bubble for energy, whatever. Like obviously all of these are sort of strung together, but we'll discuss this a lot. So let's just head into the VOD and see what we have. Okay, so you're rolling out with Winston floats. Okay, so a lot of stuff in this fight. First off, why do you think you guys lose this fight, and what mistakes do you think you personally make?
I think we lose this fight because we don't play enough together. Some people are playing a bit too far back, I feel, and our Winston is really aggressive compared to the rest of us. Like he's up there already when we're coming out the door here.
So what? Yeah, go on.
Yeah, and I think my projectile bubble usage was a bit bad as well.
What do you know about Winston floats? Like, what is the general kind of philosophy of how to play the composition?
I know very little about it. I know mostly regular goats at the moment.
So if we just quickly go back to the drawing board in Aggie, a very basic concept of how the composition works, especially if you play it into especially if you play floats into Rhine goats. Wait, why can't I draw? What's going on here? Wait, let me refresh here. Okay, there we go. So especially when you play floats into Rhine goats, you want your Winston to jump in, right? He's gonna jump in. He's gonna get a bubble. But then if you leave him out to hang, like if he jumps in and takes this space, but you guys are playing back here, then he's just gonna die, or he's gonna take so much damage that you guys won't be able to fight for this space anymore, right? Yeah. So it's very important that you're very conscious of how you use your cooldowns, what space you want to control, and when your Winston actually jumps in and gets a bubble and starts using his cooldowns, that the rest of the team steps forward and takes that space with him, right? Like that's the biggest consensus. You never want to leave your Winston out to dry. Exception being that sometimes he might want to make this jump, and it's also up to Winston, right? So if you guys are running here and he jumps here super early and you guys don't have speed boost, obviously covering this type of a distance might be very difficult. So it's also on the Winston to time his jump and measure distance correctly so that you guys can't catch up and you guys can take space with him. Now, obviously, a difference is if you start here and he's making this type of a jump, he can potentially do this when you guys have primal, right? Because he's just essentially jumping in, pulling resources out of the enemy team, and then just kind of booping people around, zoning people out, and then you guys can come in and clean up afterwards. So there are exceptions, but this is like a very basic outline of how you need to play it. So even though you have a lot more mobility than the Reinhardt goats, you still sort of want to play death ball. You don't want to leave your Winston out to hang. You need to make sure that your jumps aren't too deep. Like you're not necessarily Winston solo diving the backline isn't particularly good because the rest of the team in floats can't really pass the enemy front line, right? So if this is the enemy front line, your Winston goes like this onto the back line. There's a lot of peeling resources in the floats versus floats matchup, and you guys can't really cross past the front line if you haven't pushed the front line away. So usually in the mirror, you just fight for frontline pressure. Whoever wins the damage fight here, whoever can control the space and come out healthier HP wise, that's the team that's usually going to win the fight, because then the other team has to give up space, and you're controlling this space, which is presumably very valuable. You have high ground, and then you can slowly push them away. You have better angles with the Zarya and so on. So let's head back into the VOD. Let me just refresh.
Then my biggest mistake was positioning. I should have played more aggressive up, helping our Winston take space. Is that correct?
We'll touch on it. There's multiple things, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. You can see my drawings, right?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. So, can you guys follow up on this jump, or is this kind of a mid-range jump that I discussed was good, or do you think this is too far?
I think it was a bit too far. He should have waited a second or two until we get closer.
Because this is like the line that I drew. This is basically the space that you're fighting for. This is what you want to control, right? Because if you can control this, you have cover, you have a little bit of high ground, and then it's easier for you to kind of push your front line up. If you can control this and then start pressuring the point, you control the map. You have a lot more options, and your back lane is a lot safer. But yeah, so first error is your Winston jumps very, very deep. and you guys aren't ready to close this distance. And their Winston jumps second. Now their Winston bubbles first, so this is good. Now you and they also Zarya bubbled, so your enemies didn't really use their cooldowns very well here. You want to spread out these cooldowns as much as possible. You want to try and bubble as late as possible while taking minimal damage, because it's really, you know, 100 HP there or 100 HP there, like that's what decides these fights. So first off, your enemies didn't use their cooldowns particularly well, but you guys also can't really close the distance. So another mistake, your Brig misses the armor pack, right?
Yeah.
You get the armor pack. So now, even though your Winston kind of established dominance in this position, he can't really do much. You know, like they start charging energy first, and it's hard for you guys to catch up. And he took this position, and he started taking damage from their team before their Winston did. So their Winston is healthier, right? So now you're falling back on HP a little bit. Another question. Is there a reason you play without allied health bars?
That's because I haven't turned it off on my Smurf. I did it later in the scrim.
Okay.
I realized I didn't have enough, so I turned them on.
Because I was going to say, if you're playing with... Because in this VOD, you're playing without health bars, then I was going to say, if you're playing without health bars, that's just... you know, like obviously,
I play with them.
Okay, so, good. Yeah, because obviously you get so much more information with health bars. So you don't want to opt out of that information, but we don't have to touch on that. I just thought it was very curious that you didn't have that, because it's a lot more difficult for you to make decisions. You know, like maybe he's full HP, maybe she's taking damage. Like you don't really know how to best allocate your resources. So that was kind of that made life more difficult for you in this match as well. Now, something you can see as well is their diva is coming from an off angle, right? So she's coming in, she's probably looking for a boop, and she's looking to she's also not taking the same damage. So like this is where all your damage is going to come in, this is where your Winston is going to zap. So she's not taking that early burst of damage. Everything falls onto the Winston, and then she comes in from another angle. So this is an interesting wrinkle that your opponents are doing, whereas you guys are all coming in this way. So now you guys do put down your bubble, but your bubble is really, really late. So let's see that again. So they bubbled first. You're a bubble. You're really ahead. So now, like, guys should be very excited about this and really pressure them hard, because you have a bubble advantage. Your bubble is going to come down first. As long as you guys shoot the bubbles correctly, you should be able to win it.
Yeah.
But obviously, missing the armor pack hurts a lot. But it doesn't seem like you guys understand this, because your Winston, even though he has bubble, maybe he's also getting low. Again, it's difficult to say because we don't see his HP and because of the missed armor pack. Like now you step forward, and like they're, you know, he's stepping forward as well. They're let's see, where's their diva? Yeah, so she's stepping forward as well, and then your Brig goes for a bash, but she misses it. So presumably this happens because your Winston doesn't have enough HP, and also because he jumps at a time when none of you can really follow up. So he takes a little. He must have taken a little bit of extra damage before you guys could really help. Whereas their Winston, he just went here. He got a lot of resources. He took cover so he wouldn't take damage. Whereas your Winston stood here the entire time, took damage from possibly 3 different angles. And then even though you guys had a better Winston bubble, you still end up sort of losing the fight. Then your Brig misses the bash, so she takes a lot of damage. Now she can't really fight, right? So this fight is so far going disastrous. So based on how the fight has gone now, like what do you think the best case scenario is? Because now you've kind of lost this space, right?
That's. We should stabilize for cooldowns. Maybe heal up our Winston and then try to take the space again, doing another jump in.
Because your Brig, I think, just like a second ago, called that she's 1 HP, right? Yeah. And there's still 11 seconds for the point to open up. So it's fine for you guys, because you've lost this first trade so hard. Fall back, heal up, and then, yeah, like when you're healthier with your cooldowns, you can re-engage, because they most likely just want to control this. If they push into you, then you guys can still you can take cover. You have a mega to fall back to further back, right? So it's not disaster. So it's fine to give up this early space, especially since there's 11 seconds until the point opens. When the point opens, maybe they send someone to pressure the point, and that will be an opening for you guys to push forward, right? Like then they have less resources to control this space. So that's potentially something you do.
Yeah.
But you guys rush it. Like again, he's going in while you are going backwards. You know, so if he does want to do this, then you also need to be stepping forward and be ready to use this. So, you know, like I think optimally what you said is best. You guys fall back a little bit, give up some space. But if he does this, you need to, all of you guys need to help him as well. You know, because now he's jumping into all of them when they're controlling the corner, the whole front line. And again, the distance between Winston and the entirety of the team, and the distance between you, your Winston and your front line. You know, it's massive, right? And also because they won the fight there, Lucio can sort of threaten this boop angle as well, which makes it awkward for you to push forward. So good play by the Lucio. Like you see, like instead of you breaking their Winston bubble, you have to deal with this guy because you can't push forward until he's gone. And, you know, your team is too late to push up. So if your Winston says he's going to jump, you guys start moving right as he's about to jump. So like you guys should sort of already almost be here when your Winston makes the jump. But when he makes the jump, you are pressing S and then you press W. So that's enough to kind of lose this fight. Now the fight is kind of lost, right?
Yeah.
So what becomes number one priority now?
Get out fast.
Mm-hmm.
Reset as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm. And for you personally?
Get ult charge. And also get out with charge if possible.
Yeah. Getting out with charge, number one priority. And I think this is something you really struggle with, or not really struggle with, but this is a reoccurring issue that happens almost every round. I think you're not that great at understanding when you're kind of screwed and when the fight is lost, and you don't prioritize getting out with energy, which is very, very important because, as you know, in GOATs, the team in control that has the energy advantage holds such a huge edge, and you can just lap your opponents and grabs, right? So you have to be a little better at reading when a fight kind of isn't winnable, which like in this situation it really isn't winnable, and when you just have to be a little more selfish and get out with energy. Maybe there's going to be times when you're going to commit into the fight with 90 energy, not this type of fight, but say you have a 10% chance to win the fight if you commit with 100 energy, but you've lost two members, so one member. So 10% of the time you might win the fight and that might pay off, but then 90% of the time you will still lose the fight and you will lose the energy.
Yeah.
All right. So if you just, and there will be times when, based on the context of the game, taking this 10% risk is necessary, but most of the time it's going to be much better to just preserve energy and then have a better outlook on the next fight.
Yeah.
I'm backing.
Because now you're still focused on like you said, building ult charge.
Yeah. I want to say I preserved a lot of energy before going out of fights and stuff, but my coach said I shouldn't do that, so I stopped doing it. But
how come? Why did you say that? What was the reasoning?
He didn't really have a reasoning, but I listened to him anyways.
Mm-hmm. Well, so, but does that sort of make sense? Because if there's no ultimates on the board, and you are the retaking team, and you're starting with 0 energy, and your opponents are starting with 60 to 100,
they're automatically gonna have a ability advantage.
Yeah. If there are no ultimates on the board, they will just outdamage you mathematically. So if both teams play perfectly, this team will win.
Yeah.
If there are ultimates on the board, if both teams have 6 ultimates, this team should theoretically, if both teams play perfectly, force out your ultimates first. Right? Like they should pressure down your shield faster, which means you might have to support ult faster. And then if the ult order is correct, then again, this team gets the edge. So if you have an unwinnable, especially in fights when you don't have map control, or sorry, when you don't have the cap, when you are the retaking team and you're losing the retaking fight, but you farmed 100 energy, that's a perfect time to preserve it. And this situation as well, you guys don't have the point, so there's no reason for you to commit your body and die here if there's a chance that you can fall back and take the next fight with more energy, right?
Yeah.
And here, boom, he died. Back. So now instead of you like shooting these guys, you just use this bubble, you turn around and run, and you ask for resources. Help me out, help me save energy, right?
I'm backing.
Because now your diva, I think, is calling. I'm backing. But yeah, like instead of shooting them, focus on getting around the corner. If you get around that corner into the mega room, you're safe. Then if they're chasing, you can still keep shooting them while moving backwards. Just read their movement. Eventually, maybe they stop chasing, they go to the point. Then maybe if there's no pressure, you can peek out again and keep farming. But you need to get behind cover here, because priority number 1 is saving this.
Yeah.
And it's clear that you're not thinking that way because you're not backing up behind cover.
Yeah.
And you kite into a location where you can get booped.
Monkey dead. Give you matrix.
Still back up.
Okay. Right down.
Yeah, I shouldn't have got in there. I feel like I should have saved first purple as well.
But yeah, to your coach's point, you know, there are times maybe when it's the right situation, if you have point control and it's kind of it's not like a 90-10 fight, but maybe it's you know, 60-40, and you have the cap, right? If you have the cap and percentage points are ticking in your favor, then this might be a situation where, okay, let's commit my body, let's commit ults, because we have a 40% chance to win the fight. Even if we lose the fight, it's going to take longer for us to lose the fight, and we're going to get more percentages. So there's overall a lot more upside to kind of still commit your body in that fight, right? So it's going to be situational, but this, when you don't have the cap, then you should be a lot more conservative, I think, about getting out and be a little more selfish. And again, so we're talking about communicating your bubbles in a way where you communicate your intention. So now you know you have to rebuild energy, but you bubble and you don't say anything. Your Winston could have just easily stepped out and taken damage. So this is something you can do as well, because between fights, it's very important that you keep farming energy.
Yeah.
But he has no idea that you're about to bubble him. So here you could potentially add 30, maybe 35.
Like 80 on Rally. Maybe 70 on Trans. Yeah, they're gonna be I don't think they're gonna have anything by Rally this fight. They might get Grav and Trans some like halfway through the fight though. Yeah, I think they're gonna be. I'm going out right side. We have to. Sorry, no start to sell. Speeding in. One Alicia here. Take a BT. Alicia can die.
I'm bubbling for charge.
They have no armor. On the monkey.
So you say when you bubble, which is good. Something you can do as well is communicate a little bit before, like, I'm gonna bubble you, and then call who you're gonna bubble.
Yeah.
Sometimes you won't have the time to do that. Sometimes it's gonna be a reactionary, but like in this situation, you pretty much know from what you see, you pretty much know you're gonna bubble this guy, right? You know, so this is something I can bubble you, Winston. You know, and then he's gonna know that he's gonna get bubbled. Right. So you can call it a little earlier.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look to bubble you, and then he's gonna know.
I grab. I'm counter grabbing. I grab. I'm counter grab.
So your counter grab. What is next priority after you shoot out the counter grab?
Using my bubble correctly, which I'm not 100% sure. To use it early, use it late, who to use it on.
So it's gonna be situational, but what do you think about in this situation? So you have, let's see, I think you have, let's see, because the quality is awful, so it's difficult to see.
Yeah. I grab.
So I do believe that's a Brig, your Diva, and your Lucio.
I should bubble Lucio then.
So
because he's in LOS of the other team in the graph.
exactly. So you and usually a lot of the time when a lot of your teammates get caught in a grab, and this is going to be in Ryan Goats as well, Lucio and Brig are the ones that you're going to look to, because usually your Zen will have a trance for the graph, so you usually won't be looking to use it on the Zen. So as a rule of thumb, if your 200 HP targets get caught in the graph and they're exposed, they should be priority targets. Because if say in Ryan versus Ryan Goats, they grab, you trance, the Reinhardt comes in, and he's gonna always look for a pin on Lucio or on Brig, so that he gets the one shot through your trance, right? So you usually look to save these guys, especially like you say in this situation, because he's exposed to the entirety of their team. But yeah, you don't do it fast enough, and he just dies. Yes, you get a little bit distracted by the Winston, but the Winston doesn't matter. Priority number one, as you relieved the pressure with a counter grab, which is good. But then immediately, how do I most effectively use my bow?
Yeah. Even off light behind. Even off light behind.
Mr. Keyboard, is that your coach?
Yeah, that's my coach.
Okay, so something we can while we review, because it's an interesting discussion point, Mr. Keyboard. What we discussed was that Synoyd should try to get out in sort of lost fights. Synoyd should be looking to get out with energy rather than committing his body and dying and retaking with 0 energy. And he said that you told him that might be a good idea, and we sort of discussed scenarios where that might be a good idea, but it might be something that is interesting to discuss afterwards as well. That's basically one of the biggest things you missed in this review. But yeah, you guys cleaned the side up pretty well.
They're gonna have one in primal this fight.
So is there a reason you guys start holding this side?
No. We should be holding left side and taking the high ground.
Yeah, because now you're a little slow to that side. Right? Like you're a little slow. So you make this rotation late, and now you bubble your Winston, but like you guys can't really push off of this, right? So you're committing. You do get energy, but there's nothing you can really do with it.
Yeah.
You know, so if you guys play that side and they go around, your Winston could just potentially play this corner, right? Like if they retake this side and you control this side from the beginning, your Winston can just potentially hold here, and if they push forward, he can pressure them like this. Your Lucio should be holding this, so that if they try to cross, he can boop them, and then you guys are shooting from this. So as they're retaking, they have to worry about three angles, which is why it is usually very, very hard to retake and pressure the point from that side. I mean, it's kind of hard from both sides, but yeah. But now they get a lot. Like now they get on the point because you guys just used bubble for energy here. He gets booped. Now he's under a ton of pressure. You guys don't have the boop threat from here, and then their Lucio I think is playing here, so you can't really cross and help your Winston. So a little bit of a misuse of resources. You guys clean up on my. See, like this Lucio is sort of bothering you. But if your Lucio was here and either booped them or booped him away, then you can cross easier too. But yeah, like it's just important to have the right starting position.
Nice. Okay, we can be aggressive with grab next fight. I think they're not gonna have the spot holes yet, but they're gonna be close. Let's try and use this first. Okay, they're very close to grab.
I try not to hit them. Right, so we're just gonna go harder grab here. I think we'll go straight away. I can split with bubble as well.
Yep.
I got
They're going left, I think.
I'm going.
Okay, ready? Big.
Focus the grab.
Bubbling.
So what do you think about?
I think we'll go straight away.
What do you think you can do a little bit better here?
I can split with bubble as well.
I think I can call a bit ahead that I grab.
It's the same thing. Yeah, it's the same thing. What we talked about bubble. It's a little bit ahead. Like even if it's just like half a second.
Yeah.
It helps your team a ton.
I got charged.
They're
Yeah.
going left, I think.
Because he says they're going left, I think. You see that he's here. Now you already know that you're going to shoot the grab here. Like in your head, I think you've already made up your mind, correct?
Yeah, I have.
But he doesn't know that you've done that. So you look at it, he's stepping backwards, right? So you're grabbing, but your Winston is going backwards. But if you say half a second earlier, I'm going to grab the corner, he's not going to give up the space. The follow-up is going to happen a little bit faster. And it's a very, very small thing. But if you get into this habit of like calling what you want to do or your intentions a little bit earlier, everything just flows smoothly. And at the highest level, that's like these little edges in every single fight, they add up. Like if everyone does these little things.
I'm going.
You see, like you grab, like no one is here to follow up yet. Right? Like the follow-up still isn't there. So if they potentially if they had a trance here, they could use it now. Instead of having to use it immediately, they would be able to wait a second to use it. That bubble in one, I like that call.
Chase it.
We can't chase anything.
I'll go back.
Okay, I have primal, they have grav.
Yeah, I'm gonna play back to bomb that grove. We have chance for it too.
Yeah, use first, please.
You can be aggressive with primal onto the.
So, in this situation, maybe isn't the best example of this, but I think you could potentially stay for a self bubble here and just get up to 100.
Yeah.
Because again, so actually, let's go to the paint room again, and I'll just explain this concept, which I'm sure you grasp, but I just wanted like everyone to be able to visualize it. Are you on Aggie?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, so if we make wait, let's make this line a little straighter. So if this is the end of the previous fight, and this is the start of the new fight, and let's say there's 30 seconds here. Right, let's say this is 30 seconds usually between the end of the previous fight and the start of the new one. Let's divide this into 3. So your self bubble is 10 seconds. Your projected barrier is 8 seconds. So really, there's usually like this is not always going to be 30 seconds, but let's for this example, let's say it is 30 seconds, which means you can potentially get in 2 bubble rotations before you start the fight, because obviously you always want to have your cooldowns up at this time, right? You never want to be down cooldowns when the next fight starts. So here you have to have your cooldowns back. So when is the perfect, based on this graph, when is the perfect time to use your self bubble?
The third mark, so like 20 seconds in. So I'm high charge and it doesn't deplete.
Here, where I marked.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So if you use it here, you still have it for the start of the fight, and there's a less depletion time because it depletes by 1.6 per second. So you know, in this time you will lose 16 energy. But if you use it here, then you're going to lose 32 energy, right? If you don't even use it here, you're going to lose you're going to lose even more. So you're going to lose 48 energy. So very important that you try to find this opening, right? And like, to try and use one here for energy maintenance. And to do this, you can either do this yourself, but you can also ask for resources of your teammates, right?
Yeah.
So this is something that you that's important that you start doing. So wait, let me refresh again. It's a little bugged out for me. If we go back to the VOD review. Okay. So you have projected. You have 86. And you couldn't, like, now your team is falling back. So obviously, let me change that. So you didn't get a full wipe, which means they're still dangerous. They only lost 1. So you can't obviously stay here for too long. But at the same time, the last spawner is still spawning. So if you potentially can use your self bubble here, they still won't be ready and immediately fall back. They still won't be able to punish that window in the next 10 seconds. Most likely, right? So what kind of resources do you have to ask for in order to set this up for yourself?
Defense matrix and speed.
Yeah, most importantly, speed, right? Because you don't want to you don't want to overstay. Try and catch this maybe, or catch a little bit of spam, and then not have speed because your Lucio just speeded back and he's thinking about the enemy ults. So you have to wait. I'm gonna charge energy. Stay with me, Lucio, or like boost me out or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you can potentially get up to 100.
Oh, they have grab.
Yeah, I'm gonna play back to bomb that grab. We have transfer to.
Yeah,
They have
use transfers, please.
You can be aggressive with primal onto the Zarya and try and force grab. So
So like now you'd be at over 80.
I can
Yeah.
it's easy.
And now you use your self bubble for energy to get up to what you would have already had, or like close to what you would have had. But you guys just called. They're coming back with a grav. So you're using. Obviously, it's not easy for them to get the grav off here, but you're still using one of the most important resources to counter the grav. Like if they would snipe the grav on you and your diva wouldn't eat it, and you don't have the self bubble, and you guys are a little bit late with a support ultimate, you might die, right? Just because you're using this for energy. Whereas if you already sat at 80 from like having a bubbled rotation there, you could just be holding this a little more selfishly to counter the enemy grab rather than using it for energy. Yeah, so they choose to grab there, but if they grab here, you might die.
Yeah.
I'm grabbed. I can primal. Don't worry about me.
Break bubble.
I bubbled you.
I'm primaling.
Break that.
I might be able to get there now.
I'm playing point.
Yeah, I'm contesting.
Solo. I'm going.
I like the grab. You know that she's out of mech. You can lock up the Zarya.
I use bubble.
Mucky one, the jump.
Okay.
Nice. Don't do it.
Okay, so this is a Smurf, so your settings are a little messed up.
Get charge.
Yeah.
Okay, no, but 5.
I don't see them. They're on the right.
We can hold here.
I bubbled early.
I don't see Zarya. No.
I'm discorded. There's no person.
I bubbled in 4.
Oh, no.
Careful, Diva.
Right. Push on.
Right, still one. Run.
He's dead.
You're alone, Sid.
I'm on 10 point.
I can bubble. I bubble 9.
Zen's half. Zen's off, guys.
I can't. I'm not with you. Sorry, sir.
Let's try and back out.
I'm dead.
I lost my.
Die point.
Okay, last fight.
Okay, so what mistakes do you make this fight? And why do you lose this fight?
After we use our bubbles, let's save amp to speed.
I missed my, or I misused my bubble.
Mm-hmm.
My projector bubble on the run.
Mm-hmm. So how do you misuse it?
I used it too early. I should have squeezed it a bit more. I
Mm-hmm.
think.
What else?
Ooh. I'm not quite sure.
Okay, so let's begin with a bubble.
See them? They're on the right.
We can hold here.
I bubbled early. Yeah.
What could you do in communication
Bubbles, let's
to avoid this mistake?
to speed up.
I could say I want to bubble for charge. Let's
I don't see them. They're on the right.
wait a bit with engage.
Yeah, or you can, you can, because you have to dictate the tempo, right? Like you're the Zarya player. You can say, let's bubble first and fall back, or something like that. Because in this situation, you see them there. If you say, let's push them with bubbles. If you say that, then the entirety of your team will be ready to follow up, and your guys are gonna be, and he's gonna be ready to swing. Because optimally, because if we look,
We can hold.
you bubble, he has no clue that he's gonna get a bubble. Right?
Yeah.
So, number one, the bubble is too early because you can't close the distance. Like the rest of your team isn't ready to follow up either. Number two, he doesn't know he's gonna get the bubble, so he's not even ready to push forward. Maybe he just wants to hold the corner. But as soon as he gets this, like now he has to get value out of it. He has to push, but he has his shield up, so it's clear that he's not ready for it. And so you need to, now would be a good time to call. Let's push them with bubbles. Your Reinhardt would move. You would wait till he steps forward a little bit, drops his shield, starts his swinging animation, and that's when you bubble. That's how you get value, maximum value out of your bubbles. Because you never want to bubble and have your Reinhardt holding shield for half of the duration.
Yeah.
You know.
I don't
Because you get one swing in, but he can't even close the distance. Again, the distance is still too far away. And again, the rest of your team isn't ready to swing. But if he's making this move but hasn't got to the bubble, but knows that you want to bubble, this would be perfect. You push around here, you give him a bubble, you take a little bit of an off angle, the rest of your team pushes in as well. Maybe your Ryan can swing on the discorded Lucio. Maybe you get the free kill on the Lucio, right?
Yeah.
Or at least he swings on like 3 people, and then if you don't like what you see in the trade, then you can fall back when they get bubbles. Or maybe they bubble defensively and their Reinhardt just holds shield, but you put the pressure on them in the correct way. But now he got one swing in on air. He swung air one time. That's the value you guys got. You step forward to block a little bit of damage, but now you guys are just kind of screwed. Because now you don't have any bubbles, and they still have their self. And you are in a location where your Reinhardt, like now you can't get this Discord out. Because your Ryan tried to salvage the play, he overextended, and you can't really retreat anymore. He can't drop his shield because he's going to die. And if he holds his shield, he's also going to die.
Yeah.
Their Lucio is taking, started to take the off angles, and their Reinhardt can swing on a bunch of you. So, yeah, so you kind of throw that fight. And again, if you just get into that habit where we see like every fight, you call your bubbles, dude, like a half second, I'm gonna bubble you, and he's like, okay, and then immediately everyone can take that information and make the tempo shift internally in their heads like half a second earlier, right? Because if you just say tempo shift now, then it takes time for that tempo shift to register in the minds of 6 other people. And then they move, right? But if you can kind of preemptively see these openings when you want to do it, it makes it easier for the entirety of the team. And then your trades are a lot better. Now, is this fight winnable?
No, I should just get out.
Same situation, right? No cap. The opponents haven't capped, so you have no percentage points to defend. Very important to preserve energy, especially on a map like this. Because even though like you guys trade a kill here, at the time when both of them died, you were out of the fight and you were still like 1 or 2 seconds away from the fight. So even if you get into the fight, it's gonna be sort of a 3 versus 6 on the point until you arrive, and then even when you arrive, you guys need to kill 2 just to make it even. So yeah, gonna be very difficult. Now your Lucio just has tried to back out, but you should be the one calling, I'm getting out with energy as soon as that second kill goes through.
Yeah.
I think with these first bubble things, I need to know you're doing it so I can back up at the end of the bubble.
Yeah, your Reinhardt is a sad little man.
Pepe has.
Wow.
They need anything.
No. They're gonna be at 60, 40, maybe 80 on twins.
I think they're gonna have trends. I think they're gonna have trends on rally.
They're gonna be kind of up, right?
Let's try and push aggressive.
Yeah.
What's wrong? What am I not happy with here?
I should have gone with my team.
What else?
I should have said I'm late. I'm not there.
What else?
We should have regrouped and then gone.
They need anything.
So
They're gonna be at 60, 40.
I'm gonna try and get energy main.
Maybe 80
Right?
Yeah.
Everyone knows. Okay, let's wait for Zarya.
I think they're gonna have trends. I think they're gonna have trends
Nice. You've caught up a little bit on energy.
on rally.
Now, but because you didn't call that you're going for energy, they don't know, right? Because if you listen to comms,
They need anything.
No. They're gonna be at 60, 40, maybe 80 on twins.
I'm pretty sure someone called Scoutnap, right?
They used They need anything.
No. They're gonna be at 60, 40, maybe 80 on twins.
I think they're gonna have trends. I think they use.
Wait, let's listen. I'm pretty sure some.
These first bubble things, I need to know you're doing it so I can back up at the end of the bubble. Because they're just pushing on us with their bubbles.
They used They need anything.
No. They're gonna be at 60, 40.
Yeah, there it was.
I think they're gonna have trends. I think they're gonna
So they don't expect you to. They expect everyone to listen.
Yeah.
Oh, comms are too low. Okay.
They're gonna be kind
Keep
of
it up, bro.
Yeah, and like you said, wait, guys, I'm not there.
Let's try and
But the whole time you don't call it.
Yeah.
They have no armor, they have no armor. I'm dropping. Wait, I'm getting Discord off and then I'm
ready to
going.
go in a second.
You know, maybe what if they pushed you and caught you or something? You know, like it's just.
Yeah,
Yeah.
dropping down.
Let's push aggressive with rally.
Yeah, I'm swinging.
Feeding.
Oh, why did you do this early?
They have no armor, they have no armor. I'm dropping. Wait, I'm
It feels like
Discord off
this because the self bubble like
and then I'm
Ready to go in a second.
Yeah, I'm dropping down.
Let's push aggressive with rally.
Yeah, I'm swinging.
you know, like why the self bubble here?
Ooh. I don't know, actually, honestly.
You know what I think? You know why I think you self bubble here?
Why?
Because when you bubbled main and then you saw that your team is split, you're like, oh fuck, I fucked up. And then the whole time you're just kind of in your head, you're thinking, oh, I fucked up. I need to regroup with my team. This is a really awkward spot. I've never been in this type of a spot. How do I group up with my team? And that's dominating your thought process.
Yeah.
When that shouldn't, like, that wouldn't even be in your head. But that's, I presumably, I think that's what's going on in your head. You like, I fucked up. I didn't call. I'm still split. My team still doesn't know. And so you go into this fight and you're like, you're not ready. You forgot that they have Diva Bomb. You forgot a lot of things, and then you're an autopilot at this point. Do you think that's a reasonable assumption?
Yeah, I think so.
Because I don't think you would ever self bubble in this situation. There's no reason otherwise.
Yeah.
And that's how I see, like, as soon as you start communicating little things, intentions, things you want to do, the game becomes easier because everyone's on the same page, and then it's easier for you to focus on your own game as well. But now, because you used self, you don't know where the bomb is, you have to split, but you also have to focus on hitting a target bubble. You hit it on Ryan, but now you're super split.
Yeah.
So now you're just completely out of the fight.
He got beats. Focus Ryan, guys. Still on Ryan.
Now, what do you think about the situation?
Get out.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing. You lost your Ryan. And so let's take a look at what happens. They've beat it and killed your Reinhardt.
Yeah.
He got beats.
And I rally as well.
They beat it, they rallied, they killed your Reinhardt, and you are going this way. So again, yeah, you lost one, but you are also essentially out of the fight for 3 seconds. So now the rest of your team is fighting 4 versus 6 against a beat and a rally. There's no way you guys are winning that fight.
Focus Ryan,
Yeah.
guys. Still on Ryan. Okay, reset.
They used the bomb and the beat and the
And what the enemies are calling, get her energy, kill the Zarya. So they will overchase for this. And they get the energy.
They have grab, trans, and shatter. Okay. I'm gonna play back to bomb that grab. You can try and grab first.
Okay.
Let's go for the right again. Keep us close.
watch out for boop.
I'm not there. Wait a second.
Let me check.
Nice. You called it. I'm not there. Wait a second. You learned from your previous mistake. Because again, I could see just in the way you moved and how you played that fight that was bothering you, that you realized that you made that mistake.
Yeah.
He's here.
Let's just drop down. Ready to go.
Let me think about the situation a little bit.
Let's just drop down.
Ready to go.
So if you are counter grabbing, then your target bubble it doesn't matter as much when you have the Reinhardt shield, because the Reinhardt can't pin. Like, you can't walk around and pin it. If you didn't counter grab, then obviously you would have to, like we said, look at one of these guys, try and hit it on the Brig or the Lucio. But yeah, because you grab second, he can't pin. It doesn't really matter that much.
I'm gonna pin Ryan.
You Matrix.
I'm bubbling one. I'm bubbling the elbow.
What else could you do better here? What should you do now?
I should focus the Brigands out of range since she's a squishy and I don't have trans up at the moment?
Yeah, you could do that. And if you do that, what should you do?
I could also get more charge use in my personal bubble.
And what else do you need to do? If you are
Call it.
Perfect, exactly. So your grav came out second, so they will be stuck like half a second longer, which means your Reinhardt will be able to kind of swing on all of them. If you step forward here, again, with you use your target bubble your self bubble here to block the heals in case a trance does come out. And you just isolate the Brig. You do a lot of damage to her, and even if something goes wrong, you're back with your team, right?
Yeah.
And you get more energy immediately. So there's so many upsides here.
I'm gonna pin Ryan. Zone yourself.
But you target bubble here, so your bubble is late, so your energy charges up slower, and you get nothing out of this bubble. Like no one's really shooting you at this time.
Bubble one.
Right, so you lost 40 energy. We can't really see it, but you lost 40 energy. And their trance did come out, so if their trance was a little earlier, like it's important that you step in and cut the trance with your self bubble.
Yeah.
But it's you guys have a lot more ultimates in this fight, so you have more room for error. Same thing here, like when you're helping her and you're pushing Zarya, just call like I'm pushing with you, you know, so he knows. Because maybe like in this situation it doesn't matter. Because now one of like your diva says she's out, but he's still chasing and you're still chasing. Yeah. So if someone says she's out, and it sort of means that they're focusing the point, so maybe he will stop chasing as well because he thinks that no one's gonna help him, and then she gets out with energy, which is disastrous. Like you never want to let her do that. So when you hear she's out, you know, you just tell your brick player, I'm chasing her with you. Get her energy.
Yeah.
Right? Because now, like he doesn't know. Maybe if he takes a little more damage, maybe he bashes out, and then you don't get this. So again, important to know that you guys are going for that play.
Another bomb will they have, and another beat.
Yeah, they're probably close to grab too. Zone yourself.
She barely didn't farm.
I don't think they're close.
They used grab and she barely didn't farm.
50 at most. They're going right.
I'm gonna try and build my
Bottom. Go close.
Let's be aggressive with rally.
I'm rallying it.
What? So
They're probably close to grab.
wait, let me see. What were the ults here? The enemy ults? What's the ult check here? Let me listen to it.
Still on Evo V.
Baby. They use grab. They use well.
Shatter.
Another bomb will they have, and another beat.
Yeah. They're probably close to grab.
Okay.
Zone yourself.
Do you ever try to farm energy here using your teammates on this map?
I don't think they're close.
Rarely.
So it's like a two-way thing. Like obviously if your diva goes up here and they path top, you can get a little bit of energy. But then obviously if they have their bubbles and you don't, then you might have to give up space or you can't engage into them as aggressively over there.
Yeah.
But it's something to consider potentially, like especially if you end up if you're like on 0 energy, you know, like now it's still okay because you want to control that space, you want to be able to push into them, but it's something to consider if you're 0. You know, you say diva, get me some energy. Again, using another teammate as a resource to get energy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try and build my
Bottom. Go close.
Let's be aggressive with rally.
I'm rallying it.
Swinging. I'm pushing on the right. On the right. On the right. I'm gonna chat to this.
Send on. Bring.
On the right. Wait out. Back up a bit. Make sure we stay
I'm gonna grab this.
Yep, I'm moving.
I'm on the right.
I grab. Bubble.
On the grab.
I'm on the right. Nice.
Not bad.
Okay, I have another shatter.
Guys. They're gonna have
Shatter. Graph.
Yes, Nima, this is a scrim.
They still have bomb, right?
Yeah. I'm playing back to bomb their grab.
I'm checking them.
We're close to another shutter.
I think they're coming top right.
Yeah, top.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, they're top.
Remember we have charge.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's be aggressive. Let's be aggressive. Cause
Yeah. Right, we don't feed their bubbles. As soon as their first projected's out, we go, okay? Projected. I'm pushing up a bit.
Run is half.
right on the right. Right on the right.
I bubbled.
Let's be aggressive. Let's be aggressive. Cause
Yeah. Right, we don't feed their bubbles. As soon as their first projected.
Do you like your your positioning in your self bubble here? What do you think?
I should have self bubbled a little bit earlier and then not taking as much poke.
I think you don't take. I think like I mean you do get the energy, but I'm just thinking maybe it's better to wait till they drop so that you can all in them.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna get energy anyway.
Yeah.
Because your plan is you guys have a little bit of an energy advantage. Let's be aggressive as soon as they drop. You guys are calling to not feed energy, so she uses this. So now, if within the next 10 seconds one of them drops, you guys are gonna push in. You will still get 100 because you have 2 bubbles, they have 1, and you know, like the engagement should be a little cleaner because you don't really have to catch up on energy. But it is important that you have both in case you guys want to engage. Especially, you know, you called their rules. They said maybe they have Grav, maybe they have Diva Bomb, and those like your bubbles are good ways to prevent those ultimates from getting value. So when you step in here, take poke and get energy. Like you do get energy, but you also take damage, and you also, you know, like you guys should just be staying away, waiting till he drops, and then going all in. I think that's probably smarter considering the situation.
Yeah, I agree.
And then you still have the option, like if she like yeets a grab or something, you still have your bubble to potentially defend yourself. Because if she does have a grab here and you get grabbed here, you're dead.
Yeah.
I'm pushing up a bit.
Run is half.
right on the right. Right on the right.
I bubbled.
I'm bash to bash.
No matrix. No matrix.
I'm on the back.
Grab.
Using bomb. Using bomb.
So good screening bomb.
Send that.
I'm shooting. My shield's low. My shield's low.
Raise one. Raise one.
Breaks down. Breaks down. Breaks down. Breaks down.
I use my bubble.
On the break. On the break. On the break. Break on back. Big one. Big one. Big one. Big one.
Good break. I got Lizzo.
No matrix.
Zarya's one. Nice.
You're top, I bubbles.
Diva.
I bubbled you low.
Top right.
You win this.
Diva's off.
Got me.
Good tracking.
Thank you.
Excited about DPS potentially coming back.
Oh yeah, I practice my aim 1 to 2 hours a day
Yeah.
now since I'm done with school.
Yeah, I mean, if the 2-2 lock happens, then it's probably happening in ranked as well, and then you can actually play DPS heroes again.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
They're on top. They're on top.
Even though Zarya is really fun, I've learned
Yeah.
I've learned a lot of.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you can do so much. You can carry a ton.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, even though you might be off Zarya duty soon, like, these little communication things and, like, thinking about your communication in a different way is going to be very valuable for you in other metas as well, because it's important. You know, like, pocket me here, or, like, asking for information. Like, if you're in a Widow meta, where's the Widow? These things are very, very important to communicate. And if you get into these habits, you know, same thing with Tracer. If like Tracer Winston comes back, you want to dive, feeding info to your Winston and making sure that your timing is correct. Because in a dive meta, timing is just as important as it is in a GOATs meta. So being able to understand and calling things like half a second or a second before it's going to happen, very, very important.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try safe shield.
Lucia behind us.
I'm on the right. I'm on the right. They're projected. I'm on the right. I'm on the right. I'm swinging.
We can run.
Zarya.
Not the best of walls, but you guys do isolate them and kill them.
Nice. Good job.
We can just Zarya.
Your opponent's kind of
Safe shield.
they're a little half-assed with this commitment.
Lucia behind us. Lucia behind us.
I'm on the right. I'm on the right. They're projected. I'm on the right. I'm on the right. I'm swinging.
We can run.
Zarya.
Like, why is the rest of the team not pushing in to help these guys?
Yeah.
But you position yourself well. Like, you know you have the protection of the wall. You can see everything, so good positioning by you here. Just use that wall, because you don't want to take the spam coming in from there. And then you just destroy the Rhine. Which is pretty much what you do with anytime you play Mei compositions. You just try to use the wall to isolate Reinhardt. If you miss completely, you can't fight. You can't fight until your wall is back up again, right? Because you just get outbrawled.
Our team have had a problem against Mei GOATs earlier, so like the other team, how would you say would be the optimal way to play into Mei GOATs on this map and, for example, a control center on Lijiang?
So again, you just want to play areas where the wall gets less value, and then understand that when the wall is off on cooldown, which is I think it's 10 seconds, or is it 12? It might be 12 seconds.
It's 12.
12, yeah. That's your 12-second window when the Mei GOATs team can't do anything. You just push into them. Or they have to play defensive. Like, their Reinhardt can't really stand, hold this position, and swing. So that's your time to take map control. You also have to think about, like, we have to play areas where the wall can't isolate us. So obviously on this map, it's a little tricky because the wall can cover the entirety of this choke point.
Yeah.
But actually, your wall doesn't cover the entirety of the checkpoint. So your wall doesn't cover everything. So there will be a lot of situations where you can't cover the entirety of the thing, and you're playing into Mei GOATs, and they put a wall that isolates Reinhardt a little bit, but there's still a path around it. So it's just important that when you are moving forward, everyone is ready to immediately walk around the wall and commit and help the Reinhardt, and either peel for him or commit to another target. And that's basically how you need to try and play it. Like,
okay.
As soon as the wall comes up, Reinhardt is gonna hold shield and wait for the rest of his team to come in and help.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other intricacies, like with the ult economy, how to use ultimates and things. But in the neutral game, at least, wall is super important to consider, because you also don't want to, push in a way where someone's gonna get ice. Like, you don't want to push in here if the wall comes in like this, which is why Mei GOATs has worked quite well on this point. But if your wall isn't perfect, then you usually lose the first fight. There's also, like, a lot of teams, the way our teams countered it was that they wait till point almost opens, and you have you split like 3-3, like 3 guys go in here and 3 guys go in the other side. So for example, because again, so if you're Zenyatta, you guys wall here, and say the wall is a little late and all 6 of them get through here. That's still like a good opening, because you guys have point control at this point in time. You're a lot more spread out. Like, your Reinhardt is probably going to be here, someone's going to be here, but your backline is going to be further back. So even if they push in as a 6-man unit, your wall is late and they get through, your Reinhardt can still potentially swing on like 6 people, whereas their Reinhardt can like swing on 1 or 2, and your Zen can have better sightlines. So it's very dangerous for like the Zen to step in here when you guys are controlling the point and you're risking it with the wall. So something that a lot of teams did on in Owl, like, they would send let me think about the heroes here. I think they would keep Lucio, Ryan, and Zarya here, I believe. Diva, Zen, and Brig would go the other side, or like some kind of variation. Maybe Diva goes, Diva, Zen, definitely, and then most likely Brig the other side as well. These guys, because you have speed, because the Mei will always look on the side where the Reinhardt is. So if your Mei sees the Reinhardt here, she's going to be looking to wall here. So your Lucio stays to give the speed boost to the Reinhardt and the Zarya.
Yeah. And when the Reinhardt gets walled, the other 3 drop down and peel for him, I guess.
Yeah, they drop on the other side. So now your wall hasn't walled anyone off. You've just locked yourself in, and the other members of the enemy team drops behind you. And like, their Zen is a little bit exposed there, but you guys are going to be so focused on these guys pushing you, and their Zen also has the Brig and the Diva on his side. So if you guys just turn and try to focus the Zen, she has protection. I mean, the Zen has protection from 2 characters who can peel for him, and they can reallocate resources like that. If you try to take the frontline fight, well, you have a Zen shooting you in the back, and their Zen, Brig, and Diva are dropping on your Zen, like on your backline. So if you don't focus on them, then they're gonna kill your backline. So, and again, like the Ryan GOATs has accomplished the most important thing by dropping, by avoiding one of your biggest cooldowns. They've set themselves up where they can brawl you, and then they can kind of just close the fight out. So usually that's how you want to play. And your coach is saying in chat, we never get through Mei walls on lead gen control center. So maybe that you mean in like on retakes or whatever.
Yeah, mostly retakes.
Yeah, so you just have to try and go through a different side, use fakes, try and fake the Mei out. But yeah, it is a little bit tricky. When you do have map control, you just want to play on point because it's a lot easier to like push around it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Just play around wall.
Oh yeah, you guys accomplished that because your opponents are a little bit sloppy.
Main.
My Gary to wall.
Oh
Yeah, I fell off there.
yeah.
I should have called that and then rotated faster up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm scouting.
Well, first off, you should never drop.
Yeah.
Main.
Someone says main, but you don't see them main.
Yeah.
You know, so maybe they're faking, right? Like they. Actually, if someone calls main, that means they've probably dropped here, and that call should usually be pretty clear. I'm not sure who's scouting now because you don't have a diva. Usually, like your diva would check here and she would see that the Reinhardt drops, and then she could call that they're coming main. So I'm not sure who's.
It was our brig that called.
Okay, but I'm not sure where she's scouting or what's the situation. But either way, regardless, you don't see that they're coming main, and even if they were coming main, you wouldn't drop, right? Like you don't want to voluntarily give up high ground. Like your comp isn't good at brawling. You don't want to brawl, you just want to play off of the Mei cooldown. So you want to abuse high ground for as much as possible. Like maybe get a bit of a wall, you can push here, poke them down a little bit. But as a Zarya, in general, you never, when you have high ground, you never want to give it up voluntarily. I mean, there are situations where you do, but usually that's a power position for you. So you never want to give that up because you can always drop for high ground, you can't always go up. So say they do go main, you get a good wall, then you can drop because then your whole team is engaging. But now if you drop like no information and without your team pushing first, if they fake and go elsewhere, you're screwed. You don't have good angles for bubbles, you have to get back.
My Gary to wall. Yep. They might get kitchen, remember.
You know, because none of your team, even though someone said that they're going main, none of your teammates are dropping.
Yeah, they are.
Kitchen.
Yeah.
I'm coming up again.
On the line.
And yeah, like you said, like you noticed yourself, you didn't call that you're not on high ground. Because your team is like going all in, as if they presumably they got a good wall now. Like you don't know because you dropped and you don't see anything, but they're engaging, and now your Reinhardt is here. So presumably he's here because he took too much damage because he didn't get a bubble on the engagement. So again, the rest of your team needs to know this, that you're rotating around. So when you've made the mistake, it's important that it's important to communicate with your team.
Okay, I missed bubble. Kill one. We have to win on him.
He's low.
Got it.
I'm dead.
Freezing diva.
Jermaine clutches. Mr. Law OW clutches it. He freezes the entire team. Oops.
Yeah.
Freezing Zarya. I'm frozen.
But also you lose energy.
Winnable.
Nice job.
I'm ignoring baby diva.
So you guys win that fight, you keep energy. A lot easier for you guys to play.
They have grabbed on a
Yeah.
You stand.
Because you can't now this is like the stuff we talked about, like now you are sort of in this area, but on this map and with your composition you can never really use target bubbles to charge.
Yeah.
Let's just rally and try and force out ults and we go next fight maybe.
You're gonna have graph, beats, trends, chatter. They're going kitchen again.
Kitchen.
Let's volley early this fight.
Okay. Everyone push in on them, okay?
Yep.
I got booped off.
Something booped you?
Chatter.
Or did you just draw?
They're going kitchen again.
I think a Zarya ball hit me or something.
Volley early this fight.
Okay. Everyone push in on them,
It doesn't seem like anything,
okay?
but you do take damage from something, so
Yeah.
Yep.
I got booped off.
Do it, rally.
okay. Like you see again, like now it's so hard for you to judge the situation. You're also in a position where they could potentially just kill you,
Yeah.
or they can shatter you and kill you, and you can't read the situation as well, so you don't bubble in the right time, and because you don't have high ground and you can't control your position, you miss the bubble. So yeah, there you see, just voluntarily or involuntarily dropping high ground just puts you in such a bad spot.
Yeah.
Where's Frozen? Randy Frozen.
A bubble one.
Lucio 1 right side, Lucio 1, Lucio 1.
Give it back. Shielded. I grabbed it. Winnable.
Let's go. Freezing, freezing, freezing. Just leave it, just leave it.
I want HP.
What did I not like about that sequence? From here on out.
I moved off.
Freezing, freezing, freezing. Where's Frozen? Randy Frozen.
A bubble one.
Lucio 1 right side, Lucio 1.
Bubble 1, good call. So from this point onwards, what would I like you to do?
Calling targets who I'm on.
No.
Communicating more what I'm doing.
Yeah, you could do that, but most important thing that you have to communicate.
That I'm going to grab.
So if we do this frame by frame, in your head, when do you think you know that you're gonna use your graviton? So let's see how much earlier you make the decision to use your graviton and when you call it.
Lucio 1, Lucio 1.
Tell me when you think.
I decided now. Like the moment I started focusing Diva, so I'm at 90 and I'm going to get grab.
You know now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know that she's out of mech, so you know that you're gonna use your ultimate at some point in the next 2 seconds before she gets into mech.
Yeah.
Again, very important information. It's a scrappy fight. Maybe some of your teammates are getting low, and someone makes the call, go back to point, play slow on point. And if they make that call in this moment, and some people start falling back, you might lose this fight just because you didn't communicate this. But if you take command here, I want to grab, I'm gonna grab them, and then everyone's like, okay, and then you potentially close it out. So by you just making the call and now in this frame, you sort of saves you from a lot of saves you from losing a lot of these fights where you guys might get split.
Yeah.
It's again sort of the same situation that we talked about when you guys were chasing Brig in the previous map.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the grab is good and you guys close it out.
I want HP. I need this.
I'm gonna wall it main. I'm gonna wall it main.
I'm back soon.
I'm with you, mate.
Zen go through.
Just go on the Zen first, on the Zen first.
Yeah, you know, so like even so this is a last fight situation. Doesn't really matter. They have the chance to touch it, but same thing. Like you know that they're gonna have to come in. So even if this is not like 92%, but say it's 75 or whatever,
I'm back soon.
and you presumably call that their main or you scout their main, like this is the position you're most likely gonna take, right? Like you're gonna probably look for a wall. You're gonna look for kills here because while they're crossing, you can potentially get a kill. Maybe at least with when you play goats versus goats, you're most likely gonna do that. When you play Mei, maybe someone will call that you want a wall on the point, so maybe you wouldn't do that. But still, like this is with high ground, you can make so many more plays and you can do so much more. So never ever. This is one of the biggest things that I stressed to all my Zarya players. Never ever voluntarily drop high ground unless you have to, because you have to understand not only is it like we saw the game becomes much harder for you to make reads and like you put yourself out of the fight, but most importantly, if you have high ground and you are high charge, the enemies have to deal with you, right? Like say, wait one moment.
I want HP. I need heals.
I'm gonna wall it main. I'm gonna wall it main.
I'm back soon.
I'm with you, mate.
You know, it's like if they're pathing here, maybe Diva has to fly at you, maybe Lucio has to come at you, especially like on control maps it's a little bit different, but say it's like a payload map and the payload map goes like this and the checkpoint is here and you're holding this high ground, like you pressuring from high ground and then your team holding the payload gives you such a huge power position, right? Like you know, so holding that power position and not voluntarily dropping it gives you such a huge advantage because it's off angling and it's off angling in a way where like they either have to deal with you, which is very hard because they have to boop you down, and if you have a self bubble you can always protect yourself with a self bubble, or they have to path in a way where they're going to push you off high ground, so they would have to path all the way. Again, this is a bad example because I'm thinking more payload maps, but it's kind of a mindset you should get into. Like they would to avoid this, they would have to path all the way around, clear high ground, and push you down on the ground. But that takes time. You're winning on time. Like there's so many advantages that you don't, that you get. Or they have to ignore you and they have to kill your front line. But even then, like if you read that correctly, you can. Maybe your front line backs off. You still can shoot them in the back and get kills like that. Or maybe you can drop at that point and help your teammates. Okay.
Just go on the Zen first, on the Zen first. You can die, you can die.
There's bubble.
On the Lucio.
Okay, you guys just close it out here. So, one last thing I want to go through before we end. Actually, do you have any questions? I'm going to talk a little bit about floats, especially on Sanctum.
I don't have any.
Okay. So, if you go on my stream now. Wait, let me open up Epic Pen. If you go on my stream, and I'll kind of go through a couple of examples, because what you said, like you don't really have that high of understanding of how floats works. So I'm gonna just show you a couple of Overwatch League examples of that particular stage and how other teams play it, and kind of go back to some of the concepts that I touched on.
Yeah.
Okay. And I need to finish this fast because my headset is running out of battery. Okay, so this is an interesting wrinkle by Dallas. Wait. Why can't I draw? Why is this not working? Epic Pen, please. Let me just reset this. Epic Pen. Okay, there we go. Okay, now it's not working again. Okay, there we go. It seems to be working. So you can see, like, Dallas has an interesting wrinkle here where they send both of their tanks on the other side. And so it's a little bit different. Like, you saw your opponents sent one of their tanks to the other side. Well, you guys just went in a straight line at them. In this situation, Dallas sends both of the guys on the other side. So let's see how this plays out. And Shanghai goes, in a default way. But what you see, neither Winston jumps into this space early before the team is ready, right? Neither Winston even jumps into that space because for the reasons we talked about. So now you end up in a situation where neither team has jumped. Their tanks both have a little bit of an off angle. So if Shanghai pushes Dallas's tanks, they have to worry about this angle as well. And this is a way in which Dallas can get a bit of an edge. You see, so and you can see like they're worried about RCK here, right? And and they still have to shoot forward. They have to focus forward. But now RCK has a great angle to just use his rockets into the back of the front line of Shanghai Dragon. So like I said, 99% of the time in the neutral fight on this particular point, it is just going to come down to who wins the frontline battle.
Yeah.
And you can see like how everyone's helping, like how tight the backline is with the tanks. Like Zen is a little bit further back, obviously. He doesn't want to take too much damage, but they're still playing very tight on each other. And you can see Gregory gets demeched here immediately because of this off angle. And they get a huge edge. Focus was a little poor. They could have killed Gamsto and then this would have been a win. But again, very nice way in which they take this. But now, like what we talked about, Shanghai knows like they're one down. The fight is over. They can't fight for this space anymore. They back off. Instead of someone jumping in and suiciding like you guys did, they just back off and they buy their time. Point opens in 2 seconds. They know that Dallas has to send someone to the point. That might potentially be an opening when they can make a play.
Yeah.
And actually, Gregory goes to the point, right? Gregory goes to the point to pressure the objective. They wait for their cooldowns, and then Gamsu jumps in with a bubble. So some people might be thinking, oh, we need to relieve point pressure. Some people might think we need to kill Gamsu, but it's still, now Shanghai still has a fighter's chance, rather than just like suiciding and losing the fight.
Yeah.
And because of this, all of this distraction, I don't know how, but create an opening for Coma, right? Like eventually, Gregory leaves the point, but this pressure, like someone had to deal with him. Someone had to deal with Gamsu, and then Coma gets a little bit of space to potentially get a boop, right? So good comeback, good initial fight by Dallas, good little wrinkle with their tanks, and then good comeback by Shanghai to make it even. And now they're controlling the space.
Yeah.
Right? But you can see, Gamsu jumps in or moves forward, everyone is with him. They're ready to go. He goes in a little bit early, but everyone is super close behind him. So again, what we talked about in terms of distance between your Winston and the rest of the team. You don't want to leave your Winston hanging, but he also needs to be wary about how deep he jumps. Yeah. So that's example number 1. This is example number 2. If we can get... God, I hate Epic Pen. Let me restart it again. Oh gosh, it's working now. Okay, so let's see how this one plays out. This one is different. So if you could see there, Muma actually split and went to the other side. So the opponents you guys played in this scrim, their Diva did this, but now the Muma is doing it with the Winston. So he's going for a pincer play. They're gonna bait and they're gonna try to jump second. So let's see how this plays.
Yeah.
They give up this space for free. Houston does, because their Winston is obviously not there. So Fusions is free to take the space. Instead of orbing the Winston, Houston orbs Jake here, because he's sort of the front line here. He's doing what Winston should be doing, and he's putting a little bit of pressure forward. Dante steps forward, charges some energy, and now they've forced out Boston's Winston bubble. Right, so you've gotten out one of the major cooldowns, one of the major damage mitigation cooldowns off of Boston. First, even though you essentially start the fight 5 versus 6. So now you've created an opening where you can potentially have a better bubble. And presumably, Note in this situation might have used quite a bit of his matrix, so a lot of damage mitigation gone from the side of Boston. Now Muma jumps in. So he's going to jump in. He's going to get damage on most of these guys from his jump pack. And he's gonna put down his bubble, and it's gonna be a better bubble. So that's how they throw in a wrinkle to gain an advantage in the resource department. You can see, like, now the bubble is up for Houston, but it isn't for Boston. And Boston is all clumped up here. You see, and they fall apart. Right? So, and again, usually it's just going to be like who wins the frontline war, who can... so even though, like, Boston controlled this corner the whole time, like, they controlled this and this. Like we said, like, Dallas last time controlled these two areas, and they won the fight off of that. But in this situation, it didn't really matter that much that they held the space, because Muma had a better bubble. And they used that opening when they had the better bubble to shoot the guys who were over here. You know, like, Note and Fusions are full HP. So it's clear that the Muma's bubble, which was placed here, I split up the two teams, and then all of the damage for the rest of the team went into these guys, went into the Zarya and went into the Zen, and they get the kills here instead. So it doesn't always have to be a kill on this, but the fight is decided about how the front lines play. So maybe this is kind of a good way to explain or get a little bit of a better understanding, both how these compositions work, when you need to retreat, when you need to go in, and how you can kind of incorporate little wrinkles to get ahead in the cooldown department.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any other questions?
No, but if I get any, I'm gonna probably send a message in the, I don't know, something.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll finish it up right there then. Thanks for watching, guys. To keep supporting this type of content and the channel, hit the magical subscribe and like buttons. Also, make sure you hop onto the Mineral Miners Discord to join the community and potentially take advantage of some coaching. You can find the link in the description box down below.